The Hebrew word Noach has the meaning of... Anyone? Call out loud.
Rest.
I hear you, rest. Sorry, I might have too much wax in my ears. Rest. This rest does not simply mean laying on the couch and relaxing, but finding the proper location where one will receive Yahweh's satisfying and eternal blessing. Do you know that the word Noach in the Bible does not start with the birth of Noach? The word Noach first appears on the 7th day of creation, the Shabbat. Exodus chapter 20 verse 11 says, "For in 6 days Yahweh made the heavens and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and did Noach rest on the 7th day. Therefore Yahweh blessed the Shabbat rest day and set it apart as Kodesh, holy." It's quite interesting how in that verse we've got the Noach rest and the Shabbat rest. So we find here that both the words Noach and Shabbat both mean rest, with both of these two words intertwined together. They go in hand in hand. They're inseparable. You know what I mean? Yeah. Okay, so when is the next time the word Noach used in the Bible? In Genesis chapter 2 verse 15, the Tree of Life version, it translates the original Hebrew text beautifully. Then Yahweh Elohim took the man and gave him Noach rest in the Garden of Eden in order to cultivate it and watch over it. So we find Adam entering into Yahweh's Noach rest for him. This is Yahweh's plan for Adam and all his descendants, that's us, to enter into Yahweh's rest. Hebrews chapter 3 and chapter 4 go over entering into Noach rest that Yahweh still has for us, culminating at the end of Hebrews chapter 4 verse 9. So there remains a keeping of the Shabbat rest for the people of Yahweh, reinforcing the connection of the Noach rest of Yahweh and the Shabbat rest of Yahweh for the people of Yahweh. Have you read this? Well done. So Adam is put out of the Garden of Paradise, and Noach's rest is no longer his. He longs for Yahweh's Noach rest, so he waits 930 years for it. Anyone prepared to wait for something for 930 years? Last week, Fred said how the names all have meanings, and this is shown in the generational names, and each meaning of the name is really important. Ha'adam means the man. Sheth is appointed. Enosh, mortal. Canaan, sorrow. Mahalalel, the beloved Elohim. Yered, shall come back. Hanok, teaching. Methuselah, his death shall bring Lamech, the despairing. And Noach, rest. Saying it just in English, Ha'adam, the man appointed mortal in sorrow. But the blessed Elohim shall come down, teaching, and his death shall bring the despairing. Who is the despairing? Adam and his descendants, us. But before Noach rest comes to Adam, while he's still alive, Adam dies in despair. He misses out on receiving Yahweh's Noach rest for him. Noach rest is born 118 years after Adam died. So telling a story, all these people are born, and before he gets to the last one, on the despair, dies, misses out on the Noach rest. While our English Bibles do a very good job translating Hebrew into English, there are many Hebrew words that don't have an exact English counterpart. One of these Hebrew words is shokath, which means to be ruined. To help us understand this word, imagine a potter. He's shaping a beautiful, very beautiful vase, clay vase, and as it spins around, He fashions it with his hands. The potter makes it even taller, but in the process the clay becomes too thin. The vase starts to collapse into itself, quickly deforming, and in seconds it becomes a clayey mess. It's just gone through the process of being ruined. This is the meaning of Shabbat. Now that we have this picture of Shabbat in our minds, let's see how this Hebrew word Shabbat is used in Parashah Genesis chapter 6, verse 11 and 13. And the earth was Shabbat before Elohim, and the earth was filled with violence. And Elohim looked upon the earth and saw that it was Shabbat, for all flesh had Shabbat their way on the earth. And Elohim said to Noach, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence through them. And see, I am going to Shabbat them from the earth. Excuse my Hebrew. I'm not fluent in Hebrew. I'm not good at Hebrew. I'll try my best. But you get the message about this message of Shabbat. The end of flesh has come. So he's taking them away. But Yahweh, he's going to do this Shabbat. But Yahweh is love. How can someone who is love bring Shabbat on all the life that he has named? That is not a God of love, is it? Kephibah, 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 5 says, Elohim did not spare the world of old, but preserved Noach, a proclaimer of righteousness, and 7 others, bringing in the flood on the world of the wicked. For 120 years, Noach proclaimed to the people to live a life of righteousness so that they would repent from their wickedness and be saved from Shabbat. Yahweh loved all the living that he had made so much. He didn't want any to Shabbat. Consider Jonah. He warned Nineveh for just 3 days. Well, there was 40 days it was going to happen, but it was only 3 days journey and around it. And all the people, when they heard the message, they repented and turned from the evil way. Thus they didn't perish. Yet despite Noach's warnings for 120 years, with the ark growing larger each year as visible proof, all the people rejected Yahweh's warnings for them. You know that the ark still has the world record for being the largest wooden boat ever built. Even up until 1858, it had the world record of being the largest boat ever built. It wasn't until with steel they made bigger, because before that was all wooden. It was a big statement. But the people of the whole world chose to ignore it. Today, the Bible is the most sold book in the world. Let's not ignore it. It warns us of Yahweh's coming judgment. All of us will be judged. None will be excluded. The Bible tells us what to do. Kephibah, 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 9 says, Yahweh is not slow in regard to the promise, as some count slowness, but he's patient towards us, not wishing that any should perish, but that all should come to repentance. So Noach, his family, and the animals enter into the ark, and Yahweh closes them in. It's as if Yahweh places his protection around them. Parashah Genesis chapter 7 verse 17, and the flood was on the earth 40 days, and the waters increased and lifted up the ark, and it rose high above the earth, and the waters were mighty and greatly increased on the earth, and the ark moved about on the surface of the waters, and the waters were exceedingly mighty on the earth, and all the high mountains under the heavens, they were covered. This is Noach's account of the great flood from his vantage point inside the ark, while he is floating around on top of the waters. So what we're going to do now is to look at the Earth's geology through the lens of the top scientists in their respective fields to see how the rock layers of the Earth with their collection of fossils give their account of the Great Flood. But before we give the Earth's geological account, let us first find out what the Earth was like before the flood. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1 verse 6 tells us about the water on the planet. Elohim takes this one water which covers all the land and separates it by putting some of the water over the planet with an expanse, a sky, between it and the water of the oceans below. Then in verse 9, the oceans come to wait together into one place, so that there is now dry land of the earth above the waters. It is all one landmass, with all the continents joined together. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 1, verse 2 also tells us of a great deep. In 2014, researchers announced the detection of a vast reservoir of water trapped within the Earth's mantle at a depth of 660 kilometres. Scientists are slowly catching up, as this deep water was first recorded back in Bereshit, Genesis. In Bereshit chapter 7 verse 11, the earth's mantle of the great deep bursts open, the vast superheated water underneath spurts forth as many huge geysers going kilometres into the sky. The breaking of the earth's mantle starts the earth's plates moving at about 5 kilometres per hour, which splits the planet's single landmass into separate continents, which begin to move apart from each other. Massive earthquakes trigger tsunami, tidal waves, kilometres high, going from east to west. And that's what they see in the fossil and the geologists science find in science. The ark is located at the northeast on higher ground, where it is mostly protected from these supersized tidal waves. By the time the tidal waves get to the ark, almost all the power of the water has been dispersed. The oceans of the north to the north of where the ark is situated also avoid most of the power of the tidal waves, with a lot of the marine life up there suffering little effect. But where the mantle breaks above and below the equator, which is the centre line of the earth, the first powerful kilometre high tidal waves takes the marine life in their waters and drives it at tremendous speed and power into the land. When the mountains are hit by them, they shatter. Some of them are propelled into other mountains, shattering them. Whole forests of trees are broken off, snapped off at their roots and washed far inland. Many marine life and wildlife are pulverized together into tiny fragments. This first super tidal wave covers all the lower lands of the earth. As the water settles, the heavier sand settles first. Sand in the water settles first, forming a sand layer that over the coming months will turn into sandstone. The pulverized marine life in the water and the earth life is lighter and settles above the sand layer. This layer, higher layer, compacts down over the coming months and turns into limestone. Every few hours, another supersized tidal wave comes, with there being 5 super tidal waves in total. Today, the lower lands of the earth display the effects of these tidal waves, leaving behind 10 layers of sedimentary layers of rock, hundreds of metres deep, even sometimes up to over a kilometre, layered like pancakes, one on top of the other, each with their own limestone layer above it. Now, the higher lands of the earth, which are further away from the tidal wave impact points, they remain untouched by the first tidal waves. Some of the larger dinosaurs are able to escape to these higher lands, but are finally caught up in the last tidal waves. These settle down into a thick mud layer, which compacts down over the coming months. This turns into rock with their fossils. Today, we can find these fossils with 95% of the fossils being marine life and just 5% being dinosaurs. Amongst these fossils are many, many clams. Amazingly, these clams are exactly the same as the clams that we have today. Isn't it amazing that the clams that we have today display no evolutionary change? They're just the same old clams. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 8 verse 1, and Elohim made a wind to pass over the earth, and the waters subsided. All of this violent earth mantle movement has caused hundreds of underwater volcanoes around the planet. They are spewing immense ash into the upper atmosphere. This causes the earth to warm up the atmosphere, which in turn causes strong wind currents. The oceans warm up by 5 to 10 degrees, causing great evaporation, especially around the equator, and the oceans begin to drop and the upper mountain ranges break the surface. The warm, moist air travelling through powerful air and wind currents blow north and south, where they are deposited as ice onto the mountains and on the oceans as great ice sheets, causing the start of the Ice Age. The oceans drop even lower. Over the next 150 days, as Noach records, some of the land moves up and forms the mountain ranges. The ocean floors slowly start to sink, causing large underwater valleys. It goes down, the land goes down there. This causes the ocean levels to drop greatly, and the Earth's land goes above ocean level. Hundreds of huge saltwater lakes up high on the land all around the world break through the soft ground and cut away many sedimentary layers, causing hundreds of canyons and thousands of valleys. Some saltwater lakes remain, and later on these totally evaporate over the years, leaving large, dry salt lakes, which they find in America and Australia. Tehillim Psalms chapter 104 puts it this way: Bless Yahweh, O my being, O Yahweh my Elohim. You have been very great. You have put on excellency and splendor. Who is laying the beams of his upper rooms in the waters? Who is making thick clouds his chariot? Who is walking on the wings of the winds, making his messengers the winds, his servants a flame of fire. He establishes the earth on its foundations, so that it would not totter forever. You covered it with the deep as with a garment. The waters stood above the mountains. At your rebuke they flee. At the voice of your thunder they hurry away. They go up. The mountains are going up. They go down. The valleys and even down deep oceans, they go down to the place where you founded them. You did set a boundary. They do not pass over. They do not return to cover the earth. Bereshit, Genesis chapter 8, verse 4. And in the seventh new moon, the seventh day of the new moon, the ark did Noach rest on the mountains of Ararat, and everyone comes off the ark. In Bereshit chapter 9, verse 3, Yahweh adds to mankind's vegetarian diet by saying, every creeping creature that lives shall be for you as food. What are these creeping creatures? Well, the Hebrew word used here is, and I'm going to say it wrong in Hebrew, remes. Is this maybe close enough? Getting one little nod. While many translations have remes translated as things that move, it actually means crawling or swarming creatures. The remes are one of the three types of land creatures Yahweh created in Bereshit chapter 1, verse 25. Interestingly, Yochanan, John, the immerser of water, followed this diet from the time of Noah. Just as Noah was righteous and was immersed in the waters of the great flood and emerged to a new world, Yochanan came in the way of righteousness, immersing people in water, calling them to righteousness, for the kingdom of heavens has drawn near. While Noach was the first to receive the teaching about remes, Matthew chapter 3 verse 4 records how Yochanan lived it by eating locusts, a type of remes, and wild honey produced by bees, which are also remes. So does that mean every kind of remes is ours for food? The Hebrew text gives us clarity here. The Hebrew word for food used here is, get it, la'akla. Close enough? Akla means food, and the la at the beginning carries the idea of determining or distinguishing. So Yahweh is saying, these remes shall be for you to determining as food. He's not saying every remes is automatically food. Rather, Yahweh is giving us the responsibility to determine and select which remes are safe and healthy to be our food. So this verse shows us that at the time of Noach, Kentucky Fried Chicken wasn't yet on the menu, but Kentucky Fried Crickets were. Instead of Big Mac beef burgers, they could have yummy Big Mac locust burgers. The progression of our menu from Bereshit chapter 1 verse 29, which is vegetarian, through Bereshit chapter 9 verse 3 to Leviticus chapter 11 shows us something important. Biblical food isn't simply anything edible. Rather, food is what Elohim defines as food, and within those boundaries we're given wisdom to determine what to select to eat according to his word. For Elohim is into determining and selecting. At the end, he will judge everyone. He will determine and select the very best, the sheep, to dine with him. The unacceptable, the goats, will be kicked out. There is no dining with them. Just as Yahweh selects the best and rejects the unacceptable, he wants us to do the same. Selecting the best that he has for us according to his word, and rejecting that which his word indicates is unacceptable for us. I'm just going to have a quick drink of water. Water. There's a lot of water today. Dry here, but in the reading. So Noach has 3 sons. Now, if we look at the order of the text of the reading of the Bible, who is the oldest? Shem. Shem's the oldest. Who's next? Ham. Ham's the next. And the last is Japheth. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. This is important to know because we're going to touch on it next. So Noach plants a great vineyard and makes some delicious wine. He gets really drunk and removes his clothing inside his tent. Afterwards, Ham, Noach's second-born, sees the nakedness of his dad. Ham, the second-born, tells his brothers about what he just saw. Shem, the oldest, and Japheth, the youngest brother, don't look at their dad and cover him up. And Noach awoke from his wine, and he knew what his youngest son had done to him. You see a problem here? The youngest one's Japheth. Hang on a tick. Japheth's the youngest son. He did the right thing. He didn't do wrong to his dad. What's going on here? Then Noach says, cursed is Canaan. Let him be a servant of servants to his brothers. So instead of Ham getting cursed, Canaan, Ham's 4th last-born son, is singled out and cursed. That doesn't sound fair, does it? Why single out Canaan, Ham's 4th last-born son, to be cursed? Many scholars get stumped on this one. But if we turn to Jewish thought, we find a Rabbi Rashi of 1,000 years ago indicating that it was Canaan who was the instigator of it. So why would Rabbi Rashi say this? Well, we've got to take into account the Hebrew language. In Hebrew, the youngest son can also mean the youngest living male descendant. So it could have been that all of Noach's grandsons had been born with Canaan being the youngest male descendants. Could have been. I'm not saying this. Could have been. So what could Canaan have done for his grandfather to curse him? Well, we just don't know. However, some scholars say that they can't help but wonder if Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 15 has something to do with it. It reads, "Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbours, pouring it from the wineskin until they are drunk, in order to gaze at their nakedness." Isn't that very similar to what we read about gazing at the nakedness? Was it possible that a teenage Canaan was with his grandfather pouring his wine? But instead of being careful, he kept on pouring, then pouring, and kept on pouring the wine, until his grandfather was in a very drunken state and went into his tent and took off his clothes. So Canaan does the wrong thing. For a joke, he goes to his father Ham and says that granddad wants to see him. Ham gets to Noach's tent, and instead of sorting the issue out, he makes the situation worse by bragging about it to his two brothers. Maybe this happened. Maybe it didn't. But Habakkuk chapter 2 verse 15 warns us about who we hang out with. Are the places we visit and the people we meet trustworthy and concerned about our welfare? Beware of those who lead others into harm by getting them drunk or high for their own amusement. They don't care about our livelihood. Let's stay alert and steer clear of these rotters and ensure we have friends who look out for our best interests and safety. It's something that we can share with our children as well. It's very important in these days if you're getting very harsh days. Look out for each other. Now let's look at tents. Inside a tent is what is personal to a person. People do not know about the things of a person unless they share them with others. Today, through the internet, on their devices, people share with each other their things. We are going into tents all the time when we're on our devices. When we are visiting online tents, let's be like Shem and Japheth and keep our eyes from looking at nakedness. Only privately in marriage, between a husband and wife, is nakedness to be shared in love, honour and respect. Only in that. So Noach has 16 grandsons. Parashah chapter 11 records 70 grandsons and great-grandsons. So based on the birth rate of these recorded grandsons, great-grandsons, by the time we get to the 5th generation after Noach with the birth of Peleg, we would now have, very fast birth rate, 10,000 men and women, enough to start building the Tower of Babel. Peleg's name means divided or split. Jewish tradition is that at the time of Peleg, the people had one language, and Yahweh split that one language into 70 languages and 70 nations. And this is shown in the Hebrew word Babel, which is from the word Balel, which means to mix up. In Parashah, Genesis chapter 11, verse 9, it says, that is why its name was called Babel, because there Yahweh did Balel mix up the language of all the earth, and from there Yahweh did give his son to them, meaning Yahweh dashed them into pieces over the face of all the earth, giving us a more fuller understanding of the name Peleg. 70 nations, 70 languages. You know that linguists have discovered that all the languages that we have today go back to about 100 languages. Each year it keeps on dropping a number. And that this dates back to thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands of years. As well as this, genetic scientists have tested people's DNA from all around the world, and their research proves that all people come from just one tiny family group dating back thousands of years, not hundreds of thousands of years. So what we have today in the way of a genealogical DNA and language is living proof of the Great Flood and the Tower of Babel. This number 70 of the nations has parallels. 70 go to the foreigner's land of Egypt. 70 bulls a sacrifice over the 7 days of Sukkot. You've got to count them. There's 13, 12, goes down in number. You count them all together, you get 17. No sacrifice, the time of Sukkot. Zechariah chapter 14 verse 16 says, "And it shall be that all who are left from all the nations which came up against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to bow themselves to the sovereign Yahweh of hosts, and to celebrate the feast of Sukkot." Babel, with its origin of the 70 nations of the world, are also tied to Acts chapter 2, when the nations come with their many languages to Jerusalem and get spoken to by the disciples in their own language at the feast of Shabbat, Pentecost, because that's not the last feast. The last feast is still to come, when they speak in tongues. The disciples speak in tongues to these of the nations. In the book of Acts, speaking in tongues is one of the main signs to indicate when someone is filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. When I was a Bible college student in Papua New Guinea, I travelled with a few Papua New Guinean villages to a group of Christians who had been forced, this is well before I was a Messianic, who had been forced to live outside their own village. They had been kicked out because the village was hostile to anyone who had faith in Jesus, Yeshua. These believers had built a few houses a short distance from their former village. On the first night, I was teaching from Devarim, Deuteronomy, and the New Testament on their outdoor deck. As I taught, many villagers secretly descended upon us. The believers were terrified. They were running into the hut, grabbing knives, axes, everything, and standing around the perimeter, yelling out in language. I didn't even know what was happening. This is all in language. They were all yelling in language. I didn't know what was happening. They were thinking that they had come to kill us. But then the villagers who were hiding in the bush called out, asking if they could listen from a distance. So they gave them approval. As long as you didn't come close to us, they could listen in the bush from a distance. I didn't know if it was going to help or not. I ended up teaching louder until I lost my voice. And I had a translator. Using translator always makes it go double the time. We got to midnight. As they heard the word and the gospel being taught, they began being filled with the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. They didn't even know what was happening because I hadn't yet taught them about the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh. But that's how the Ruach HaKodesh moves. Many people chase after the falling of the Ruach HaKodesh, but the Ruach HaKodesh does not tend to work that way. In the book of Acts, we see the Ruach HaKodesh falling on people just from their gathering together, being obedient to Yahweh's word and believing in Yeshua. Remember how we touched on the ice age happening after the flood? Well, this ice age went on for about 500 years. At that time, the ocean levels were 50 to 60 metres lower than they are today. Just imagine how the ocean being so low, you'd have all this more land, you'd have a lot more land. This, combined with thick ice sheets, created land and ice bridges connecting many continents and islands. These bridges provided pathways for the animals from the ark to migrate across the planet. Then came a period of global warming lasting about 300 years. During this time, the ice gradually melts and the ocean slowly rises at 200 mil a year, just this much a year, until they reach the level that we see today. As we finish off, I want to take us back to something I missed out. The rainbow. Do you remember the Hebrew word that we went over before? Shukah, and what it means? The process of getting ruined. After the great flood, Yahweh sets the rainbow as a sign of a covenant that he will not choke off all flesh again by a flood. Notice carefully the specific words here. Yahweh doesn't say he will not shukaf all flesh again. Instead, he specifically says he will not shukaf the world again by a flood. In these words, Yahweh is indicating that another shukaf is coming, but in a different form. Kefa, Bet, 2 Peter chapter 3:10 tells us exactly how this final shukaf will come in the end times. But the day of Yahweh shall come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, and the elements shall melt with intense heat, and the earth and the works that are in it shall be burned up. Yep, there is a pot at the end of the rainbow. But it's not a pot of gold. It's a pot of intense heat, which is going to be poured out. We need to be declaring the true meaning of the rainbow. Could the end be drawing near? Today, rainbows are even being painted on pedestrian crossings. Those who paint them don't realize they're actually displaying Yahweh's sign of coming judgment, the very sign that warns of his wrath being poured out in the end times. Just as Yahweh gave Noach the ark as a warning sign to the people, he has given us the rainbow as a sign of the coming end time shukaf. The sign calls people to repent, to turn from their lives of sin, and to turn to Elohim and his righteousness by entering into his ark of salvation, his Son, Yeshua, our Messiah. 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 17 and 18. Therefore, if anyone is in Messiah, he or she is a new creation. The old things have passed away. Behold, all things have become new. Now all these things are from Elohim, who reconciled us to himself through Messiah and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. What is this ministry of reconciliation that Elohim has given each one of us? Dr. Baruch Coleman, a Messianic teacher, teaches from Israel, puts it this way. It is a ministry where we go to the lost and warn them about Elohim's coming judgment on all mankind, and tell them how they can be reconciled to Elohim through Messiah Yeshua. Let us close with the words of Kepha and Shaul, found in Acts chapter 10, verse 38 to 43, and 1 Thessalonians 5, 9 and 10. Indeed, Elohim anointed Yeshua of Nazareth with the Ruach HaKodesh and with power, and he appointed him as judge of the living and the dead. To him all the prophets bear witness that through his name everyone who believes in him receives forgiveness of sins. For Elohim did not appoint us to wrath, but rather to obtain salvation through our Messiah, through our Master, Yeshua Messiah, who died for us, so that whether we are awake or asleep, we should live together with him. Shabbat shalom.